Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend, Ed Rosa.
That's me. Hi. My filmmaking partner and I have a YouTube channel, Toothless Richard Productions, where you can see a number of our short films.
When I began publishing Blockbusters and Birdwalks, it was a hosting site for essays and thoughts that I had, and that branched off into making podcasts. Then we agreed to do a partnership, and separately I have another partnership with a friend, Richard Ryan, making the High-Low Bro Show. One thing that Richard said to me in our last recording concerning the Big Dollhouse is the following.
I think that 1971 is in many ways a crux point when American counterculture, and specifically the anti-Vietnam War movement, has begun to get a little sour.
As always happens, the counterculture has sort of become the culture, and there's a lot on society's plate.
Years ago, when I lived in New York City, I used to commute by subway, which was a great reading opportunity. One of the writers I bumped into was Michael Crichton. He earned an MD, but he gave up wanting to practice, much like George Miller did, to become a movie maker, or in Crichton's case, a novelist turned movie maker. Nonetheless, Andromeda Strain in '69 is when it's published. Right. He and other writers like him start to think about the technologies of our time, which helps birth this genre in literature and in movies, the techno-thriller. And what they tend to be built around, this is true of Jurassic Park, novel and movie, as a further example later in his career, you have technologies which are just generally understood by a wide public. But then you add to it the tinge of social negative pressures. In the late 60s and 70s, it was Cold War, baby, everywhere you look.
Oh, yeah.
So the Andromeda Strain takes its position by thinking about how can we do gain-of-function research on alien bacteria from space so we can control the world. Now, we don't really fully learn that's the case until most of the way through the novel and most of the way through the resulting movie from 1971, which is what we're focused on here. So that's one gigantic Garrett overshares a bunch of garbage in the background for why I am curious about this movie. But then there's the other one, which if you're alive today, you know about, and that's the zoonotic disease of COVID. This movie is about what happens when a little critter gets all up in the human system and kills people indiscriminately, and there's no defense against it. What's your background and attachment to this title?
I came to Michael Crichton, as so many probably did, in the wake of Jurassic Park, having seen the film. And I had a buddy that had a copy of it, and he's like, oh, you should read this. So I read it, and I just flipped. I loved it. I loved it so much that I no longer considered Jurassic Park to be a great film. It was now fine because it had eschewed the very core of the story, which in Jurassic Park is that the dinosaurs are reproducing. They are not supposed to. They are designed to not do that, and yet they are, which is the main problem in the book. And in the movie, it's dealt with in like 15 seconds. I was like, that movie stinks. This book is the way to go. And I became a huge Michael Crichton fan. I've read most of his books, I think. He just has a thoroughness and an attention to detail which really makes these stories really gripping.
Well, let me make a connection here, and this is directly about the movie and also him as a source writer. He's thin on characters. He's not really very good at dialogue that feels emotionally realistic, but he's extraordinarily good at demonstrating how the scientific mind might behave in a heightened circumstance.
Right.
This movie, Andromeda Strain, features a bunch of people who just sort of bicker in a way that almost feels like they're being people. It's like AI wrote humans, and here we have them. But they explain the processes of this scientific method with enough human touch that it's very understandable.
Right.
It caused me to think, like, wow, maybe this movie should have been shown, like in the first week of biology class back in high school,
right,
just to demonstrate how it is you take a problem and you isolate all of the things that might be attached that aren't, to figure out what you're really staring at. And then it also introduces people in 1971 to things they probably haven't thought about before.
Yeah, well, and that now, you know, are common knowledge.
We're kicking off in 1971 through a wraparound framework that tells us we're kind of getting the accidentally recorded version of a real event, a real infection problem that happened in Nevada. An American satellite has crash-landed in this small town of 68 residents. The team that's to recover it shows up and realizes everybody in town is dead, and the recovery group of 2, they die too.
Right.
Scientists are pulled in from their various civilian lives. They're taken to a secure facility. The satellite is recovered by them, taken into that secure facility, and they find that there is a baby boy and a sort of an old drunkard in this town who were not killed, but they can't give them any good information. The balance of the movie is trying to figure out, well, what happened here? What are the symptoms? In this very carefully staged facility that we spend probably 40 minutes learning what it is, how it is shaped, how it's color-coded so we can't get lost, nor can the characters, and what's at stake. And there's a central issue that the movie is wrestling with. There is one character who's given the privileges of being the odd man. And he's selected because he's a single person. He's a man. He's unmarried, has no children, no family attachments. Though he's a doctor and got a career, he's got nothing that will be connecting him to the outside world. He's been given the key to turn off the doomsday device if everything goes wrong in this lab facility, because only he is supposed to be smart enough to sort of see through the fog and say, this is dangerous and this isn't. So he's got the turn-off key. Along the way, then, they figure out what's going on. We get some interesting imagery from the 1970s about what that might be like. We get exposed to what the internet would be. We get exposed to what a touchscreen, like on an iPad, would be, long before the technology ever existed. But it's anticipating what would happen, because there's a computer that runs this joint that's kind of like the Wikipedia of then.
Right.
It seems to know everything, and it allows you to make creative choices about the facts it carries, because you don't have to worry about it anymore. You, the software called a human being, are the AI inside of this infrastructural thing. So there's that. Happy ending. They more or less expunge it from being a danger to human people past this small town where everybody dies but the baby and the old man, who they save, and they seem to go on happily ever after, except for one final note in the conclusion. Because it's a framing device of this event that happened in Nevada, when we return to the second half of the frame, the back bookend, we realize that the surviving scientist who organized this initiative is trying to get congressional leaders to pony up funds to research a better facility to shut this stuff down more quickly with greater skill and resource than what they bumped into, because there will be a next time.
Right.
So I press stop when the movie's done. I'm like, yeah, COVID.
Right, exactly.
Live through it. Well, and before that, AIDS. Right. And before that, just the common flu. And before that, Ebola. And so on and so on.
This film very well might have concluded with keep watching the skies.
Well, there's like 3 balls that went in the air when I started thinking about that wraparound structure to him speaking to Congress. And one is Strangelove. Just these noxiously, upsettingly bad government officials and military leaders who are just, they're jackholes, every one of them.
Right.
Next was Wag the Dog.
Right.
And like how you can manipulate images even with all that nonsense in the background. And then the third would be Natural Born Killers. That concludes with Oliver Stone throwing in the epilogue of the movie. Is he's cut from the headlines news feeds of all the nasty business that this movie seems to be the ultimate, most amplified version of.
Right.
But you realize, no, it's not.
Right.
Reality is so much more intensely bad.
Oh, yeah. No, the documentaries are the true horror films.
Yeah. Part of what then makes this movie good, and you made that connection, that when you bring aboard a notably good filmmaker, Spielberg in the Jurassic Park case, and this one it's Robert Wise.
A personal favorite.
So when we think about his career arc...
Yeah, he edited Citizen Kane.
And then he was also brought in to fix Magnificent Ambersons when he was taken from Orson Welles, who was out on walkabout trying to do a South American movie in Brazil.
Which he did a pretty good job of. I mean,
considering
certainly we'd all like to see, the real version that Welles wanted that we'll never, ever see. But with what he had to work with, Robert Wise certainly did a very good job.
And then you move through the 50s into the 60s, and he becomes the firmament of the mainstream. Sound of Music, West Side Story...
Day the Year Stood Still.
Right! Also, he's not restricted to just one specific genre. He seems capable of a lot of thoughtful work in a lot of different styles.
Which is funny because, one thing I have noticed among film snobs that has always bothered me is Robert Wise never really gets his due. And the rationale that I've heard for this is because, unlike, Auteurs... his work doesn't have a thematic through line. First off, I don't really believe in auteurs because that's unless you're Neil Breen,
right?
You are not doing it on your own, and
right.
you require too much skill and creativity on behalf of too many supporting players. That's not how it works. Auteurs is not real. But Robert Wise, he was like, he could do everything well. And that, to me, is equally as laudable than someone who continuously revisits the same themes.
His skill with this movie is really wrestling with a lot of stuff that a lot of people then found very strange. For example, when this core set of 4 scientist doctors are sent to this lab, it has 5 levels, and each level of the lab becomes steadily more restrictive on the biomatter that can survive it. Mm-hmm. So these different scientists, they have to be screened, they have to be blood pulls, they got to be cleaned in certain ways, and each level is color-coded. That's helpful because they have overalls. And these are some of the most advanced minds in their respective fields. In fact, our leader, Jeremy Stone, he's a Nobel laureate. He is as elite as you could come. He's an advisor to this facility being built. Right. He knows what's coming, but he hasn't actually been through it. We haven't either. And the skill then that Robert Wise hooks us in the nose and says, here, a foolish young person, come watch the movie, and look, over there is something important, the orange floor. Mm-hmm. These are its features. Now, from an audience perspective today, it takes a while to get through all those features.
Right.
But I relaxed my need to have things move because sometimes you can relax and take the ride.
Right. When you are in the hands of a capable director and writer, I'm not going to worry about this.
And in the end, it kind of does end up being important because along the way, we learn about bacterium and viruses, some of their differences, some basic ideas of chemistry and how molecules are organized on our planet, which means when they find something from another planet, it's hard to identify what's going on and how it's organized. How that's then visualized for us as we're watching these scientists in this facility visualize it for themselves, because this is something that they cannot see with their normal instruments.
Right.
In their labs, they've got all of these robotic arms. The room where they need to manipulate things is where this bacterium is.
Right.
That could kill them, so they can't be in it. So we see all of that stuff. I've got to imagine an audience goer showing up opening weekend, March 12, 1971, stumbling into the theater, the Andromeda Strain. You don't say, is that based on that novel I enjoyed staying up late? I guess it is. So, big point on history. This movie is also wrestling with some of those matters that 71 is all about. In the opening of the movie, as we discover this town of dead people, we get shots of some of the dead. So they have to be characterized by what they're wearing. So we have this cutaway of a topless woman with a peace necklace
symbol,
pendant.
And she's naked because free love.
Right. And it match cuts to a matronly gray-haired woman who's got a cross slipping out of her very well-covered, sweatered body, right? So these kinds of issues are right there, visually expressed. And while that's heavy-handed, it's to make sure that you in the back row, who are smoking a doobie in the theater, that you get what's going on here.
Right. An extraterrestrial pathogen
doesn't care.
Doesn't care. We're all the same.
Doesn't care that you're young, that you're old, that you're brown or white-skinned, that you're male, female, or indifferent to these kinds of questions. You are simply, it's food. There's an interesting shot, a special effects shot, once they begin trying to analyze the dead. In particular, our lead, that's Jeremy Stone. He's played by Arthur Hiller. He goes into this little town to recover the bodies, and he's accompanied by Mark Hall, who's kind of the beefcake. He's the lone man with the nuclear key.
He's the only doctor among this group of scientists.
Medical doctor,
MD,
that's right. Yeah. He simply opens up a guy's wrist, and it's kind of disgusting because he just cuts away at it.
And Kool-Aid pours out.
Kool-Aid pours out. Right?
Kool-Aid powder.
their blood has been turned into crystals.
Right.
It's ugly and gross. I don't like it when I watch blades go through things in close-up. I don't mind it at all, like a katana fight. That sounds great.
Right.
But to watch like that close plate, I just can't do it. So I had to kind of look through my fingers. Oh, it looks like it's fake, but no, it's still somebody's arm. It's too much, But again, back to the technology and the craft of this, many commentators talk about how this movie employs split screens periodically to just drop a whole bunch of material on you right across the screen all at once.
Which is a technique that we have enjoyed previously. We talked about it.
It was Airport.
That's right. It was Airport,
and which is just 1 year before this movie.
Right. And as we talked about, that style of editing was very popular at this time. I mean, Stunt Rock had it. You know,
and I think it comes out of the 60s, the sort
right.
of scene of those innovative modernist filmmakers who were trying to poke fun at the way movies have always been made to make them more jarring and interesting.
Right.
But here, viewer, we're going to disrupt the flow of an escapist experience to show you things in this weird way.
Yeah, it's a great way to give you more information in a scene than you would be able to.
The way that we would typically do something like that is we would develop cross-cut parallel actions. Mm-hmm. But if we just splash it all up on the screen, we get just to see it from different points of view. And your eye has to choose what you are interested in focusing on because you can't focus on all four at once. Mm-hmm. So it's an explosion of too much. We see that they just need to be able to talk to each other on something that would be cool, like if they had an instantaneous communication device where they just type some words in and somebody else can get them. Oh, wait, that's the internet. But these filmmakers had to create an environment where the camera could pick up on the characters dealing with such a thing. Now, a note of intertext, but it's not this movie, it's a movie that quotes it. In the solution to the movie, our guy Hall has to figure out a way to go to one of these little
the substations?
He has to go to a substation to insert his magic key and turn off the nuclear reactor so it won't blow off. If he doesn't do it in time, they're all going to go, and that's that. Because they realize it's a threat to the wider world if the bomb goes off, because it will just take over planet Earth, it's extra important that he get to the substation.
Right.
When the movie is set up, and that's why it's so valuable that we see all of its layers, we are told that some of the substations don't work because they've been added. They wanted more substations to avoid any potential for him to not be able to reach one that works. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, he reaches one that doesn't work. Oh, what a crisis, but we know that's looming as a possibility.
Right.
Also, they're locked in. Each floor cannot move to the one above it without this routine of being cleaned up. Mm-hmm. So the only way to get around that is to openly expose himself to the core and go right up the middle, which is the Death Star.
Right.
It's like Obi-Wan's got to go turn the thing off.
Yeah.
And what happens to Obi-Wan? Well, he meets Darth Vader and dies.
Right.
But so I'm imagining that Lucas was looking at that sequence of Hall climbing up through this facility, through its core, to go up a level, to find a floor he can break into, to find a substation that's in working order, to turn his key. Otherwise, they're all going to die, and so will the whole world. Inside, it's got these surveillance lasers that shoot a hot beam and injure him, putting him in a shock, so he can't see clearly. And because Robert Wise is a good filmmaker, we see his point of view where things are fuzzy and shaky.
Yeah.
All of that works really, really well for me. And an additional thing, which is I think Robert Wise, who at this point must have been closing on 60, that also means that he's trying to catch up to the changing field of what youth will want. Mm-hmm. This movie's pretty old-fashioned, except for some of its formal flash. The split screens we've identified, the chyron that tells you where you are, the bookend structure of being told this is basically a scientific report to the Congress. But it also has a couple of touches. The topless woman. Youth are going to want to see the boobs. Right, yeah. That's important to the youth. How do we know? Well, that's what's been going on since ratings showed up.
Right.
It has an interesting casting decision partway through. The primary four scientists and the doctor, they're white people. They seem to range in age from approximately 40 to probably early 60s. But then there's this one important nurse character who they meet in one of the lab facilities, and she is a black, excellent dancer turned actress named Paula Kelly. She plays Nurse Karen Anson. She's the technician who knows how all the facility works.
Right.
So she ends up teaching Hall how to use the bodysuit that moves through a room, how to use the tools to do his clinical care of this surviving baby and man they've taken from Piedmont before or after everybody else died. And she's there as a note, which I couldn't help but think, well, that's Uhura. That's just 5 years on from the Star Trek episode.
Right.
Because now we can do that. Of course, they can't embrace or suggest there could be romance. There's not time in this.
Well, this situation, but I mean, they did work well together.
They did, right? But then there's this really notable moment of just extraordinary sexism. The surviving man, Jackson, it's George Mitchell, another type actor. I know I've seen somewhere, but I can't quite place him. He happens to be he's a drunkard, and he's been self-caring for ulcers, and that is involved with how they figure out what this ailment is. He nonetheless is just basically dressing her down for how hot she is or not. He even grabs her ass.
Yeah.
And she just, oh, isn't that cute? Ha, smiles about it. Hall doesn't take exception. 50 years on, I mean, that would be instant. Like, I'm out of the room. I'm not caring for this fool anymore. It's such a changed environment for how care works, especially when it's a predatory white male with a brown woman.
Right.
And he's treating her literally like she's just ground chuck. Those things are kind of shocking when you see them, like that in the breasts in the opening sort of montage.
Right.
What's this doing here?
There's a touch of veracity to that, too. I mean, Jackson is obviously, he's a sterno-drinking yokel.
He's not going to be aware of civil rights education.
Right, and he's not going to really care anyways.
Yeah.
It'll be something that he would probably reject if somebody were trying to instruct him on that.
Yeah.
So that there was a believability to that.
Yeah. I've met men like this in my time.
Well, and also, I guess to reference the thing from Another World again, the women in this film aren't just bringing sandwiches and coffee.
Right.
They're very capable.
They have speaking parts. They do thoughtful, helpful things. They matter to the way the whole story unwinds. So that's a note of, quote, progress, unquote, for the time, reflecting the energies of the early 1970s.
In fact, actually, Dr. Leavitt is honestly probably the most engaging character.
She's frustrated. She gets angry. She's short-tempered. She thinks that Hall is this beautiful doctor. Sure, but screw him. He's not a scientist.
Right.
But he's also the only one who can identify what's wrong with people.
The air in that room is loaded.
Air doesn't matter. Blood does. That's the answer.
This movie, for its time, was a pretty good budget. It was $6.5 million to put this thing into production and see it all the way through, which is something like just over $50 million in today's money.
Wow. Well, and it made it back too, which is great. I mean, that's what you want.
It goes $12.3 million then, which turns into roughly $95 million today. It was more of a road show. You open it in the city, see how it does. You take that same print and maybe you copy it twice and send it out, which means your advertising and publicity and marketing campaign you don't have to spend quite as much. And even in this moment of the 70s, when America is coming apart, and certainly the American industry of movies was coming apart, there was still a dependable kind of way that you release things. What was already in theaters, Wanda by Barbara Loden, Get Carter was starting to come over from England at the same time. THX 1138, George Lucas's one of two great movies that he made, aside from the one that he's remembered for.
Right.
That is in theaters the same weekend. Summer of 42, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, and then The Big Doll House. All of that was happening at the same time. And what I guess I mean to point out by spraying all these titles at you, which is my way, is noticing that the only one, aside from this one, that has a kind of conventional feel, Summer of 42 has a kind of conventional story to it.
Right.
These others are explorations of things which people are not game for, by and large, until they are.
Right.
Sweetback
isn't
something that I think my parents watched in 71. THX 1138, huge bummer, man. Who wants to go to that kind of dystopian view of the future? But who wants to go to this kind either? It's okay because the scientists are going to save us.
Right. This time they save us.
And that's, I think, part of why this movie is fundamentally a conservative entertainment. It is saying our expert class will find solutions, will self-sacrifice to make sure that's so, because they see the bigger picture that the civilization of humanity must be preserved over any individual. It's Spock's whole thing. Right?
Yeah, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one.
Always. And that's put in evidence through this arc of these humans doing nerd work. I am a nerd. And in this world's nerd-coded universe, the nurse, this pretty brown lady, and this Dr. Hall, this athletic, virile young guy, they are the athletes in this crew who the scientists debase for being, you're merely a tactician.
Right.
You can't strategize and see the big picture. That's all we do.
Right.
I've got a Nobel at home because that's all that I do.
Yeah.
And so on. Even in this movie, that division is still being observed. The point, I guess, is this movie shows up at an opportune moment when the paranoia we felt about the military-industrial complex was confronting the generation divide between the boomers and their parents, who were not generally on the same page, at least at the edges, which we see in college campuses today being repeated, and that we see in those people who had survived and participated in the war experience of World War II coming of age in a moment where they don't trust the new tools, the new technologies, which seem to take humanity out of the equation of decision-making. It's exactly what's going on here. And then the confrontation with what else have we not thought about. So let me just close with Donald Rumsfeld.
As we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know,
We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks, a conversation between Garrett Chaffin-Quiray and
Ed Rosa.
Boop boopity doo.